The Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion gave much to the Hearthstone community to play with. While some cards bolstered old archetypes, others established new ones and changed the meta in drastic ways. In the pre-release season, the Death Knights captivated Hearthstone players around the world, allowing less obvious cards to slip through the speculative cracks of our collective theory crafting. In this video, we'll introduce the top 7 most underestimated cards from the Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion to take the Hearthstone community by surprise. In number 7, we have Crypt Lord. Its one attack left much to be desired, compared to the release of Druid of the Swarm and Spreading Plague. Pro players speculated the viability of Crypt Lord in aggressive token decks, placing it on the fringe of playability, while Vicious Fledgling was outperforming every other 3-mana minion in the archetype. An undercosted Mogashan Warden which only buffed its health for each minion played didn't excite the community, but Crypt Lord has become an aggro and token staple, replacing Taunt Creeper and becoming featured in 2 S-tier decks from the first week. Crazed Alchemist was teched into Aggro Druid in response to the expected surge of Freeze Mage from the previous Ungoro meta, but it also comboed well with Crypt Lord to deliver unexpected burst damage. The minion's ability to protect the deck's weaker minions before buffs could be found was what made the 6 health minion Taunt Wall a staple. Though some players did see the advantage to Crypt Lord in Aggro Druid archetypes, its boost from a moderately good card to becoming an S-tier staple was what made the card among the most underestimated in this set. In number 6, we have Deathstalker Rexxar. Described as being among the worst of the Death Knights, Rexxar was seen as weak but playable. With a hero power that crafted beasts, there was little to no synergy with the overall damage building strategy of the class, leaving many pro players doubtful of its viability. However, it was recently part of a mid-range hunter list made by Asmodai that reached rank 1 legend just a few weeks ago. A similar feat was achieved by Roast 4 days earlier, featuring the Hunter Death Knight. Though the card has recently been replaced with either more late game or early game options, the Death Knight has found success as a reliable anti-control tech card, promising overwhelming late game value. It's also worth noting that any card to have received the pre-release reviews it did and become powerful enough to replace High Main in Hunter's 6-mana slot must have been substantially underestimated. In number 5, we have Simulacra. It was seen as a potential combo activator by most within the pro and casual communities in Hearthstone, but with Exodia Mage taking a back seat at the time in Tier 4, players rated the card on the lower end of the playable spectrum. However, Simulacrum took Exodia Mage to new levels of consistency, having been made in addition to Molten Reflection as opposed to a replacement as some believed. The archetype became one of the best anti-control decks in the first week of the Frozen Throne, sitting at the top of Tier 1 for its ability to take down powerful but slower archetypes than in the previous Ungoro meta, such as Jade Druid. We may not see as much Exodia Mage on the ladder a month into the expansion, especially after the most recent patch update, but as a ladder deck, it lurks in the meta, ready to burn any control deck that begins to find popularity, especially Kazakus Priest. At number 4, there is Frostlit Janna. Of the cards to be revealed in the Frozen Throne, the Mage Death Knight saw the greatest disparity between pro player and general community ratings. Though Elemental Mage saw some brief experimentation in the release of Ungoro, it failed to catch on, along with most other elemental-based archetypes across that meta. With the prevalence of Freeze Mage and Control Mage at the time of Ungoro, there was little in the pre-release that gave players any indication that Elemental Mage would outperform the other, much stronger Mage archetypes to contest the higher tier decks of the latter. Mage has either found success as a combo or aggressive variant in the past. Gunther's Control Mage in the Ungoro meta was only a recent development in the class's history, and not one that gave the Elemental Mage archetype much promise. That being said, the release of the Frozen Throne surprised us. It only took a week for players such as Daniel Legend to take an elemental-oriented mage deck featuring Frostlit Janna to top 100 Legend. In fact, the Mage Death Knight was featured in several decks from both the EU and America Summer Playoffs, showing the popularity of more control-oriented mage decks that benefit strongly from the Frostlit Janna's healing and board-generating ability. In combination with Polymorph and the rise of mid-range decks, the Mage Death Knight has seen much greater success than we expected, with an archetype that was able to pivot between a burn strategy to a fatigue-style deck, giving Control Mage great versatility. With better consistency than Quest Mage in most of the pre-patch meta matchups, the deck was sitting at the top of Tier 2 before the latest patch took effect. At number 3, there is Shadow Essence. The synergy between the new pre-spell with Eternal Servitude was more or less a known interaction at the time of both their reveals. but overall sentiments towards the card were on the borderline between clunky and niche use. However, even with the prospect of pulling a 5/5 Lich King or Obsidian statue, the pro and general communities gave the card a lukewarm reception. Receiving an understated minion for 6 mana with no guarantee that it would provide sufficient value was a difficult consideration for the community to make when assessing the card's strengths. In comparison, Eternal Servitude was rated decently when traditional pre-staples like Injured Blademaster were thought of, especially in an early game curve. A viable deck with this combo was eventually found within the first week of the expansion through the Big Priest archetype, with Shadow Essence serving as one of the 3 major enablers of the deck. This new style of priest sat at the top of tier 2 for most of the first month of the new meta. At number 2, we have Prince Callus F. It scored as low among the upcoming Frozen Throne cards as his fellow princes, with many believing there are too many valuable 2-drops to even consider using the effect in any style of deck. The consensus was that aggro and mid-range decks rely on 2-mana cards to build tempo, and control decks rely on strategies that do not typically need a +1/+1 buff to your large threats and combo pieces. So why play a Mistcaller on turn 2 that does not buff your hand, and can only be activated by sacrificing every other 2-drop you could use? Much to our surprise, Prince Callus F found success by replacing Grime Street Outfitters and Hydrologists to create a more reliable hand buff Paladin archetype that climbed as high as top 200 legend by Kibler. Zoo has also been finding some success with the Prince Callus F buff, with Always Lucky taking the refined archetype to Legend 25 just a few weeks ago. Finally, Tempo Rogue achieved as high as rank 1 legend by Kranich, with few decks as able to take advantage of Prince Callus F's buffs with the deck's early game power and tempo-oriented strategy. The deck has since evolved, having been popularized as one of the more reliable ladder climbing decks in the most recent rat race. With 3 legend decks, 2 of which are performing at the highest levels of the game, it is safe to say that Prince Callus F was certainly among the most underestimated cards of the Frozen Throne. At number 1, Dead Man's Hand was the most underestimated card from the Frozen Throne. It may not be the flashiest of the cards in this list, nor the highest placing on the ladder, but it has made the greatest impact on the game among these cards the community overlooked. In the pre-release stage, some pro players speculated the infinite value Dead Man's Hand could generate, providing the first infinite anti-fatigue strategy that wasn't Jade Idol, the only difference being its immunity to Skulking Geist. However, the decline of Control Warrior and Taunt Warrior had many players look to Tempo Warrior as the next big archetype that could stand by Pirate Warrior as a ladder powerhouse that could put Warrior back in the meta as a non-aggro deck. But the spell's low game impact restricted the card's speculated strength to a bare minimum. It entered the first week of the Frozen Throne meta as a sleeper card that would remain asleep until more cards from future expansions would give it a greater purpose. That being said, players like Dog, Purple, Frozen, and Rage had other plans. Dead Man's Hand became the centerpiece to an archetype that Dog piloted to rank 2 legend. But here is where Dead Man's Hand rises above the rest. Blizzard changed the HCT rules in response to the predicament Dead Man Warrior's success generated. No card in Hearthstone's history has yet to be powerful enough to force Blizzard to change the rules of the game's principal tournament series without changing the card's integrity through a patch update, thus making this card the most underestimated card from the Frozen Throne set. We can conclude that the ratings were developed with specific archetypes and metas in mind, with few foreseeing the explosive dominance of the Druid class in this first month of the expansion. Arthas was given a high rating, with the expectation that Enzoth control decks would become strong. But that only lasted for the first week and a half, with Enzoth archetypes having fallen to tier 4 since then. Uther the Ebon Blade was highly rated because of the expectation that Control Paladin would be strong in this meta. Unfortunately, it did little to nothing against pre-patch Jade Druid with its lack of pressure and being outclassed by other control decks. A card rated that highly would be expected to make the archetype a strong ladder performer, but results showed otherwise. Even Furnace Fire Colossus was given a fairly strong rating with the expectation that Tempo Warrior would be a viable ladder archetype, which it did not, despite a strong first week by Mitsuhide. But this was more a reflection of the experimental phase of the ladder and the player's competence than the deck's competitive viability. The community ratings from the Hearthstone player base and the collective pro player ratings across several consistent high ladder finishers showed us a lot of what can be unexpected or missed during these pre-expansion card reviews, with Dead Man's Hand being a testament to what's possible in this game with enough innovation. There may be similar sleepers in this expansion, or among other standard cards, that have yet to receive the same amount of attention that could shake up the latter. Thank you for watching this post-release look into the Frozen Throne set. Be sure to leave us a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to the channel for more Tempest Storm news and Hearthstone content.